Hello and welcome back. Thank you all so much for your patience. Looks like all the players are in lobby, so we will be getting into character select shortly. Of course, if you are just joining us, this is the DMV Winter Games presented by Game Gym, live at Shenandoah University's Esports Arena, and of course benefiting Children's National Hospital. So a lot of great things happening here. We talked a little bit earlier about the changes of League of Legends and what we're going to see today, but we've got League of Legends first, and then later we'll have a little bit of Overwatch, and then we'll have the League of Legends finals to kind of close out the day. So we've got a very busy day happening here, but first off, we have got George Mason University versus Shenandoah University, and we are getting right into the picks. I will say before we get too much into these picks, the last time SU and GMU faced off, it did not go very well in favor of SU. GMU won 2-0 very handily. So how will that change? Maybe it has been a little bit of time. SU has had some time to refine their strategy, and as we were saying before that we've also seen the preseason come out at that point as well. So lots of changes to the meta, lots of changes to items as well.
Exactly, yeah. So it's funny because the last time these two teams played, when GMU was able to get that 2-0 win over Shenandoah, was actually the day before the preseason patch came out. So since then, of course, there have been a lot of changes, like we sort of talked about earlier on the stream, a lot of item changes. You actually see some of these unique bans coming out from both of the teams, particularly on the side of GMU. They're sort of targeting maybe our bot lane a little bit. But we actually see on the Shenandoah side with some of those bans that those are specifically directed at some of those new item changes, such as with Karthus and Vladimir with the Rod of Ages item that has come back after a couple seasons, and Wukong specifically for that Hydra item that has now been buffed. And we actually see that Shenandoah, because I believe that they were intending to pick Hecarim before the draft started, they're now going for sort of a safe bot lane pick, something we also talked about before, sort of this concept with the Senna and the Seraphine, or I think we talked about it before we went live, but the way that's going to work is we have the support playing the Senna and our usual AD carry playing the Seraphine, even though she's an enchanter sort of champion, and the Senna is sort of there to use the support item, the sickle support item, to sort of just poke at the other team, get constant gold income, as well as scaling all the while, because Senna scales on range the more she pokes, and you sort of have Seraphine there as sort of a mitigator and for some of those team fight situations.
Yeah, I mean, we were saying this before the broadcast, but I love this about League of Legends is the fact that even though a character is specifically assigned for a role, or we typically see them in a sort of class, they can really be played anywhere, especially if you have these weird kind of team play kind of compositions happening. So I'm excited to see how this goes, and a lot of really interesting picks here just on both sides overall.
Yeah, we see definitely GMU looking for more of a fast-paced game. They're running sort of like the Karma Enchanter, which is heavily based on, like, in my opinion, sort of like a movement speed-based comp, which they, you know, with the Hecarim and the Jhin, those are already sort of movement speed-based characters. Jhin sort of already has a lot of passive movement speed, while Hecarim is sort of reliant and does more damage, actually, the faster he's going, which is it's pretty unique. But we see sort of a counter pick on the Shenandoah side with that Aatrox, maybe slow some of that down with a lot of heavy CC, and we'll kind of see how that works out as the draft continues. We see that GMU is still sort of banning for the top lane to sort of alleviate as much pressure as possible, because of course they have the counter pick now that we've picked the Aatrox. He's not really a flexible pick in that slot. And then we see GMU kind of targeting the jungle, typically because the jungle is in the first 3 picks, mostly for this reason, so that it doesn't, there aren't a lot of bans happening. But we actually have a sub today as well for Shenandoah. Instead of our usual starting jungler, Rickla Roll, we actually have, I think Etherealist is playing jungle, and Hope is playing mid lane. So sort of a different pick here, different from when they last played. A different lineup from Shenandoah. So we'll sort of see how that affects the draft as well. As you can see, they're sort of banning the Sejuani and the Graves. And we see the Victor come out on the SU side. Definitely one of the pocket picks, something I believe I mentioned earlier that our mid laner usually plays Hope in that mid lane, is very comfortable on the Victor. And we'll sort of see how GMU responds with these last 2 picks in their draft.
Have you seen anything so far that has been kind of unexpected or out of nowhere? I feel like while they're interesting picks, everything has kind of fallen out as much as we've kind of the way that we talked about it.
Yeah, so I think with actually that last pick, the Jax counter pick in jungle, I think that's pretty standard on a high level, but not something that I actually saw when I was doing my research about some of GMU's recent drafts. Of course, again, those were before the preseason patch, so things are definitely a lot different, but not something we've seen so far. And I don't believe the Syndra has really been played from GMU either. Sort of interesting. I mean, I'm sure that he feels that, you know, their mid laner that he can pull that off. He has experience from what I saw on the other two other control mages in Azir and Cassiopeia. So, you know, Syndra kind of fitting that same role. And we have the Jarvan coming out, which is definitely going to be pretty strong, looking for the Shenandoah comp because of the AoE that we have in sort of that bot lane. With the Victor, Jarvan is a very strong combo, as well as the Aatrox. Sort of just put them in the Jarvan ultimate and sort of just abuse them from there. So we'll really see how this matchup pairs up, just because it looks like, you know, that Karma is really going to have a lot of people on that team to sort of enhance, give movement speed to, and sort of just kind of run around the map deathballing. And we will see how SU is able to kind of slow down the fights, turn them into sort of extended trades, and, you know, sort of outlast the GMU draft.
Yeah, I mean, as we were looking at the draft here, do you think that one team has kind of won out in the draft here? Do you think that one team has gotten more of what they wanted and denied enough of the other team, or do you feel like it's pretty even?
I feel like the draft is kind of even as we last saw it. It's really going to be an important phase of the game when we talk about early game. If the GMU team gets a lead, just because their comp is definitely a lot more aggressive, right? They have like sort of the Enchanter and Karma. Like I said, they want that movement speed. They want to be going in all the time. They want to be, you know, saying, okay, let's all like run at these guys all at once, basically, and sort of deathball over them. And if Shenandoah is able to sort of outlast that early game, sort of scale into the mid game, I think that's where they will shine the most over sort of some of those mid game objective fights. And if they're able to sort of slow down the pace and sort of control the game, then they will definitely find success. So I think, to sum it up, I think it's pretty even. It's very dependent on how the early game goes.
Yeah, it's dependent on the stages of the game, specifically that early game, because if GMU is able to do what they want, they'll get ahead. But if SU is able to stall them out, to shut them out in that early game, it'll be difficult for GMU to kind of find their footing.
Yep, exactly.
All right, that I can understand for sure, and I'll be very interested to see. Of course, League of Legends client does have a 3-minute delay, so we will have a little bit of time to talk more about League of Legends, about the compositions, and about the teams as well. When you were looking at these compositions, was there any team in particular, or any lane specifically, that you might find will struggle on either side?
I think maybe the biggest one might be that top lane matchup. I think that, or at least I know in the Shenandoah top laner, we have our boy Way Awesome Kevin up there. He's not typically used to playing the Aatrox as we've seen mid-season. I think it's something that he's been working on since this preseason release. The MAEC regular season ended, and until now, until the playoffs, he's been working on that pick. We'll sort of see how it goes into that Jax. Sort of a weird matchup because he really has to keep the space. Jax sort of jumps in and wants to stun on a regular basis, whereas Aatrox kind of wants to keep like a centered line of distance, like a certain amount of space in between, so he's able to use the knockup. The way Aatrox works is his Q on the edges of the hitbox is where it knocks up, but if they're inside of the hitbox, it doesn't actually knock them up. And that's sort of what Jax does. It's sort of he has a jump where he literally jumps on top of the other person, so kind of gets rid of that space. But if Kevin is able to sort of use those abilities properly while the Jax is sort of using this movement jump to get in, he'll be able to stop him, and I think it'll be pretty entertaining and back and forth.
Yeah, just hearing that, I cannot wait to see what either of these teams are going to pull out and which one of these teams will kind of win out in this game. We did talk about it before, you know, last time they met, GMU 2-0, a very solid win, but this SU team is not out by any means. The preseason has changed up a lot of things. This team has been working really, really hard as a unit to kind of shore up some of those weaknesses that they've had. And just overall, they've been putting in a lot of work recently. And I think we've seen it with the draft as well. They were able to fight this draft, able to pull out a similar composition to what they were planning originally. So I will be very interested to see. But of course, SU is that 4th ranked seed, so the underdogs for sure. GMU has just had a dominant season throughout the entirety of the MAEC. Lots of great things out of them, and overall just very, very strong and competent players. Before we introduce you to the casters, Mitch, any kind of final remarks about this game? Any things that we should be paying a particular focus to?
Yeah, sort of like I said, I think it'll be sort of a top-heavy early game. I think that, you know, that initial gank that ends up in top lane between the Aatrox Jax and the, I believe it was, or, you know, whatever the jungles are, I think that early game gank is really going to determine, I guess, the outcome of the game.
Yep. And without further ado, let's send it over to our casters. Will and Xander, take it away.
Thank you guys so much for that introduction. As you can see, it is a full house in the arena here behind us. Exciting action going on. We have George Mason against Shenandoah League of Legends for you guys. I, of course, am Will Jenkins, and being joined by the man himself, Professor Xander. What are you expecting to see from this game here today?
Well, I got a chance to talk to the coach, SU Hope, actually a player coach.
Player coach, yeah.
So also a sub in today at the mid lane. Got to talk to SU Hope a little bit, and they know what they're up against, right? GMU is a very strong squad, especially with the way that they performed throughout the entire season. And he knows what they're up against, but he feels like it's a good matchup, and they're really prepared to take it to GMU today. One of the things that he mentioned to his players before they got started today was, if you leave it all out on the table, if you come back empty at the end of the day, then you've won. Win or lose, you've won. You've put it all out there, and that's what SU is going to be looking to do today as a team. So we'll see how that shakes out ultimately. But so far, let's get into it. We got a little bit of a scuffle here, back and forth in all of the lanes, of course. But again, as the analyst desk had mentioned, the top lane a little bit of focus, as there's might be a little bit of an offset matchup there, but health bars so far a little bit in favor of GMU.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see what this bot lane will do. I talked with Creighton and Sincere before the game, and they said this is what this is the plan that they wanted to do. They had Senna there and the Seraphine to kind of just, that's a lot of healing for bot lane, and they just synergize so well together. And we're seeing this early poke come out here from Creighton on the Senna, so that's going to be exciting. And then I think whoever is able to win early on top is really going to be the difference in this one. And it looks like early pressure is going to go to Joni here on that Jax. And I mean, you got to be so careful because Jax is a hyperscaler, you know. You got to be so careful, especially with how much attack speed he gets. He does take a tower shot right there, but still at a good amount of health. However, way awesome Kevin will heal up from that. And I think mid lane is just going to be a slugfest left and right.
Oh, yeah. Oh, right. And here we go. Jax going all in. He's going to take a tower shot. Oh, Aatrox is going to back off there. Just going to take what he can, and that is going to be surviving in this case.
Wow.
Just narrowly escaping there. That was close. Jax just trying to feel out how Aatrox is going to be playing. We've got another one down near the bot lane.
Here. First blood goes to Senna, and it looks like a cleanup will also come out, though. Creighton on that Seraphine will fall. And, yeah, I mean, first blood goes to Shenandoah, but it's immediately followed up right there.
Yeah, what a response. I mean, you kind of expect that sort of exactly how the junglers were pathing. You kind of expect it all to kind of conglomerate down there in the bottom lane, and that's exactly what we just saw in one of the first major fights of the game here. And now Victor stunned up a little bit low, but going to be able to just pot up and continue to farm. Fun fact about SU Hope, also a Grandmaster StarCraft player.
Yep.
But here we go. Hecarim going to be going in, and in trouble is Jarvan. Going to be going down to the Syndra, And that's a nice little gold bump and rotation from the mid lane to help out the jungler. And Hecarim really setting the tone for how this entire game is going to be going. The pace is in GMU's control.
Well, if you want pace, look no further than Hecarim. That is for sure one of the fastest characters in the game. And meanwhile, this Jhin is in trouble. So low. Oh! Flash is going to come out. Sincere is going to get the kill onto the Jhin. Flashes to mastery. What a great kill right there. Shenandoah trying to rely on their bot lane for this, and they are doing so well. 2-0 from Sincere on that Senna, and it is absolutely going in the way of Shenandoah in terms of bot lane.
I thought for a second Jhin was going to get out with a little bit of fancy footwork, dodging that snare, but just a little bit too much as the damage continued to go down. The slow went down from Seraphine and chased him down. It was really nice pursuit there to at least try and grab something back, right? And actually SU currently with the gold lead here early, despite what feels like GMU setting the tone.
Yeah, and I think the big thing about that is this Syndra has been trying to farm up on Hope as Victor, but Victor has such a nice clear with that, with I believe it's his Q on that beam. And meanwhile, we're going to see a little bit of a scuffle here on top lane. Aatrox is going to use the W, not going to really do anything there. First Q comes out, and there is the other Qs. And now that should be a kill for Way Awesome Kevin if he can just get the dash off. Did he get it?
And we went away from it.
I don't think he got
Jax is going to live, and boy, are they playing close to that 0% health mark.
So
there
close
in the top lane. Oh my goodness.
But that's good for him, because now Way Awesome Kevin has that ability to farm, and if Jax tries to contest him, he can kill him fairly easily, because Aatrox has so much mobility and so much CC. If you're Jax, you just want it back, and then you lose a good amount of CS and advantage. I mean, if we already look at the CS chart right there, almost a 10 difference in CS, so definitely going in favor of Way Awesome Kevin after what seemed like some early pressure. I imagine, yeah, it looks like Jax is running lethal tempo, so that's something you got to keep an eye on. And meanwhile, look at the damage coming out from just Sincere. Meanwhile, though, we're going to see the stun come out from the Karma, and it looks like Sincere is going to manage to keep his ADC alive and well. And it's interesting seeing kind of a double support bot lane work out like this. And we see Senna has a 150 gold shutdown, so something's got to be going right there.
Right, and I don't know if what their intention is as far as obviously Seraphine going for all the CS and then Sincere getting all of the kills so far down in bot lane. I wonder if they would have preferred that to be on Seraphine, or if they're trying to build up both players.
Yeah.
I know typically if you're not trying to focus putting the gold onto one of the players, typically the ADC, then you can fall behind to one that might, say, the Jhin, who's getting all the kills and all the farm. And we've got another scuffle here top lane, and this is going to be an Aatrox retreat as Jax, with the pressure early, is... And it's a great job by Aatrox to try and draw into the tower, but here comes Hecarim to finish the job.
The big heal.
Oh my goodness!
No.
And he's gonna get him!
He got him!
What a trade from Aatrox to keep a cool head, full health Hecarim coming and flying in even, and just taking turret shot after turret shot, slowing him down just enough and getting that trade out. Now Jarvan's gonna soak up the top lane and protect that out. And we are still neck and neck, only 300 gold separating the two teams, 8.5 minutes in.
Yeah, and what a great job there by Way Awesome Kevin, just getting enough damage to where the turret can do the last little bit of damage. And meanwhile, Hope doing a great job of being able to farm against Syndra. So strong is Syndra, especially after that rework she had about a month ago, a month or two ago. But another thing I want to state is how important this jungle is going to be. First of all, you have jungle changes that came in with preseason. Hecarim, who is probably the strongest jungler right now, and it's kind of showing. I mean, Hecarim can just be everywhere at the same time. This Jax just wants to fight right now.
All the time.
Way Awesome Kevin also wants to fight, and he is in one of the best champions to do that with. Aatrox so strong after that durability patch, and look at that healing. I mean, It's just absolutely unreal.
And I'm glad you brought up the jungle items, because it looks like it's no surprise to me that, we've got the Senna ult coming through, trying to give a little bit of shielding over to Kevin, but no, Jax is going to prevail in the 1v1. But I'm glad you brought up the new jungle items, as it's no surprise that Hecarim has Gust Walker, and of course giving you extra movement speed. And then we've got Jarvan, who's going to be going with Moss Stomper, affectionately known as Bulbasaur, Squirtle, and Charmander.
Yeah, exactly. Whenever I play that's what I call him. But First Dragon goes towards George Mason with that just Hecarim pressure that they have. Jarvan has to kind of sit back and wait a little bit, I think. Jarvan is going to be a good shout, though, against the Hecarim. If he can trap him in that ultimate, it'd be absolutely massive for Shenandoah, because then that cuts down on the area of space that Hecarim can cover. And that's where Hecarim's the most dangerous, is when he builds up movement speed using his E or his ultimate. He's just so quick and just runs around the map so fast.
And tons of damage, might I add.
Yes, that too. And another item I wanted to kind of talk about that a lot of lanes are really abusing is Ravenous Hydra. That has seen a lot of buffs, and now you get the AoE proc on physical damage, and Jin ult's going to come out, not going to find anything there, and Hecarim will secure the Rift, however. And now, if you're Shenandoah, you kind of start to worry. That first Rift Herald is so important. And now Victor going to get absolutely stunned out and will fall. Big damage there coming out from George Mason. And Jarvan's going to try and go in, forces the flash. Karma going to get the root off. And now it looks like Etherealist is in trouble here.
Yeah, you don't want to get desperate and try to make something happen, force something. Just let this bottom lane start to take over the game. If they can get through without giving up too much while waiting for this bottom lane, who seems to have pretty solid control over this bot lane so far, then they can get out and start team fighting, because Seraphine's Encore is really great for team fights. And now, once again, a scuffle. You know it. Jack's getting into it. Can he take a tower shot? Yes, but he needs to have more of a sustained fight underneath that tower to seem to have any shot against 1v1ing Jax.
Yeah, and this is when Jax starts to get worrisome, is when he can deny you that lane presence and really doesn't allow you to farm at all. And that's exactly what this Jax has been doing. So it looks like Way Awesome Kevin's going to have to rely on a gank in order to get some farm, or at least to try and get back in it.
Hey,
and
even
get
farm,
ahead.
even if you get the jungler to come over just to help you farm up a little bit.
Intimidation.
It's totally fine, as long as, jungler's just popping by just to say hi, hopefully get a gank, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, but
Speaking of gank, here is Hecarim.
Ooh, and the SU bot lane gets split up. Is it going to be Seraphine able to escape? Is he going to continue? He will. And is he going to go down? The final turret shot. And finally, a kill going down onto Seraphine. Creighton probably elated despite the fact that both bottom lane players going down. At least you're getting something back from what seems to be a very overly hungry Hecarim, and the Cataclysm.
Etherealist with a big combo there. I didn't know Jarvan did that much damage. I mean,
oh yeah,
you
watch
goodness.
out.
What a combo there. Etherealist picks up a kill. Hecarim dying the turret for the second time in this game. A rather unfortunate stun going to come out onto Hope. Q is going to miss from Syndra. However, I believe Syndra is getting close to that point where having 2 charges on that Q is a possibility.
Well, you see so far, Hecarim, I mean, no armor to speak of at the moment built on that character. And as a result, you would think if you know that you're going to be diving the turrets, you get at least a little armor to help out. But it seems like the second turret shot takes like 60% of his health. It's crazy. But now we've got Shelly putting pressure on the top lane. And this is going to be probably the turret down. And Aatrox is going to have to watch out. It is close. I can't exactly see at the top. Got a little bit of the bar there, but it got enough to survive here for the moment. But soon enough, this tower will be going down, and the dominance from Jax so far, the pressure will continue to be even greater.
Yeah, and another thing to keep an eye on is as well with that Divine Sunder online for Jax. And then it looks like Way Awesome Kevin is going to get a lethality route, so it looks like he's not going to be building Ravenous Hydra against Jax, because when that item is online for Aatrox, his entire Q will proc the AoE. It makes his lane clear so much faster, plus the amount of healing you get from it and the stacks on the item, the way it's changed, you just get so much healing. And that's why a lot of people have been building it. You've seen it out of supports, you've seen it out of junglers, you've seen it out of top laners. Heck, sometimes you even see it from mid laners. I've seen Aurelia with it in mid lane, so that's not out of the question. And meanwhile, it looks like Joni wants to try and go in here on Way Awesome Kevin. Heal is going to come out. That might keep him alive. And Joni will get the kill, but Way Awesome Kevin does end up falling. But great job there. What a massive ult that was by Sincere Support. However, Root is going to come out now, and Creighton will fall. Jarvan is there to try and help out his dead teammate. And here we have Jingle going to come out, and it looks like that's going to be it for Sincere. Bot lane wiped out. Jungle has to retreat, and Shenandoah loses that team fight.
Wow, and I want to go step back real quick because so much has happened.
It was so much.
Now Dragon available for the taking. That'll be number 2. But you take a look at how Jax was diving. The analyst test, they were talking about how much CC can be available for that Aatrox, and I think maybe took Jax by surprise because throughout that fight, maybe trying to deal a little bit more damage a little bit faster, but the combos of the CC was just enough to have that turret help out. And
speaking
once
of combos,
again, Hope under assault. I would love to see Hope rotate a little bit more and try to utilize some of the numbers that they can put together. But it seems like with the speed that Hecarim has, this is an absolute walking nightmare across the rift right now.
And another thing to keep an eye on is the build that Hecarim is going. I imagine he will be going with Divine Sunder next. That was typically the first item you would go as Hecarim in jungle, but like I said, Ravenous Hydra is just so strong right now, and it makes his clear so much better, especially even if you just get that Tiamat online. That farm becomes so much easier. You can AoE the Raptors or the Wolves, so it definitely helps out a lot. Plus, the final item is just so strong, and we just see the absolute insane damage numbers coming out here. And just look at the movement speed he gets. I mean, that's just absolutely ridiculous.
And you know what Hecarim's going to do is going to back off that tri-bush after the ward kill and come right back through. Here you go. Just knowing that the amount of speed that he has. Okay, the ward saw me. They're going to back up. You know what? I can look like I'm going somewhere else because it was a failed gank, but now I can keep that pressure on. Ultimately, nothing's going to come of it as SU. The Cataclysm coming down. Jax is in trouble now. This top lane finally going to get a little bit of uncontested pressure. Oh, wow. And Victor almost walking out. Hope is lost.
Yeah, well, it's also a little hard to do something when you get rooted by Karma and Jin just lays into you.
Sure.
But yeah, no, SU Hope right now just kind of unable to really do anything. And another thing I want to note on Jarvan is that he's building Gore Drinker in the jungle, so opting for more that sustain. That active comes up so fast. So definitely something to keep an eye on as the game progresses. We'll probably see him going with Cataclysm and then just press his active item and then heal all that back up if he catches more than one in that circle. So that's definitely going to be something to keep an eye on. Way Awesome Kevin looks like he will most likely be going Eclipse onto Aatrox, so maybe trying to get rid of just the option of the armor, because to really try and counter lethality, you need a lot of health, and since Jax opted for Divine Sunder instead of something like Heartsteel, it gives him options as well going forward. I imagine Death's Dance will be next. That's typically the build path on to Aatrox, but we'll see what happens with that. And we see Senna with Kraken Slayer, so it looks like kind of an interesting bot lane. It worked out early, a few ganks from Hecarim as he moved at the speed of light, and now it's just kind of even. But another thing to keep an eye on, this Jin has been roaming a good amount and now has 5 kills and a 450 gold shutdown.
Oh yeah. And it looks like we've slowed down a little bit now that the first defenses of SU have been cracked open. We are going to see a little bit of slowdown, but Jax in the jungle, the top jungle, going to be trying to apply some pressure to Aatrox near that top turret once again. A little bit of time to play around in that jungle when the Aatrox has got so much pressure in lane with that first turret down. But now that they have control over the river, GMU can probably play this a little bit slower, collect a couple more of those upcoming large monsters that are going to appear in the river, and just try to keep whatever pressure they can up and hopefully not give SU too much time to farm up and make a comeback, because they are ahead currently by about 4K, which is pretty significant here in the mid game.
Yeah, and being down this amount in this stage, definitely something to keep an eye on in this. And mid has just been bullied. I mean, that is the life of a mid laner. You're either the bully or you get bullied. There's no in between. Either everyone wants to ARAM in your lane at once, and you just happen to be the only one in your lane with no one to support you, or you just get ganked by everyone in existence. And I think that's what's kind of been happening to Hope right about now, and it looks like Cataclysm is going to come out. However, Hecarim will ult out of that, and Victor and Jarvan will fall. Optimistic Ego does take out Etherealist, and now Aatrox's ultimate is going to come out by way of some Kevin. However, he gets stunned into Oblivion, won't be able to do anything, and right now this is just a cleanup for George Mason. Joni hunting down this Seraphine will get that kill. Last one alive is SU Hope.
Disaster strikes the SU squad as they got a little bit of separation from the back line and the front line, and Aatrox obviously needs to spend some time, taking up the time of the back line, right?
Yeah.
Trying to get in and cause a little bit of chaos. But unfortunately for him, Hecarim was already around the backside doing the exact same thing to the SU backline, and Hecarim currently a little bit scarier in the speed and damage department. So that was potentially doomed from the beginning, since Jarvan dropped very, very early.
Yeah, in terms of mobility, Hecarim by far wins that matchup and has done such a good job at initiating with the CC he gets from his E and his ultimate as well. So that's definitely just it's such a good initiating tactic, and it's worked out so well for them. I mean, 3, 3, and 6, 2 of those deaths to being under turret, and then meanwhile, this Syndra right now, perfect 6-0-0, and Hope hasn't really been able to get the farm that I think he would like.
Yeah, the problem with dropping that Jarvan ult down onto the Hecarim is Hecarim knows no bounds, especially when still holding ult, right? And so was able to immediately dash out away from that after dealing a fair bit of damage to Jarvan, and then there was tons of help from that Riverside Jhin, I think, just putting volley after volley over that wall. And now we're really just, if SU wants to get back into this, they've got to find a chip away at the neutral objectives wherever they can, get some lane farm if they can, and try not to give up too much else, as next dragon in about 3.5 minutes will be Soul, and Baron just sitting there waiting for the taking.
Yeah, good news on Dragon, though. It won't be up for a bit, and it looks like George Mason wants to do this Baron really quick here, and it looks like Etherealist might try and get a steal here. If he could, that'd be absolutely massive. We've seen it before from Shenandoah. Can they do it? The ward goes out. Baron hits him for some reason. I don't know what that's about. It looks like they're going to try and collapse on them to try and prevent that steal.
Oh my gosh, the CC train was unreal.
Yeah, he didn't stand a chance right there, and Baron goes in favor of George Mason. Power play on the line for George Mason in hockey terms, and right now Shenandoah just backpedaling as much as they can.
And that was such a smart GMU play, right? I mean, they paused for a moment, realizing that Jarvan was just waiting in the wings, and stopped to send 3 over the wall to take care of it with the lockup, and then continued to finish off the Baron completely safely. And all to kick that off, they put the Rift Herald down in the bottom lane to apply pressure to that bottom lane turret.
Yeah.
So there was pressure on the map while they were still able to do Baron. I mean, really, really smart overall macro play from GMU there.
Yeah, and another thing is just that Syndra. I mean, late game Syndra, mid game Syndra, early game Syndra, it doesn't matter. Syndra is good in every part of the lane. Maybe not so much as early, but late game, getting that execute online with 100 stacks of her passive, that's something you have to keep an eye on. It will execute anyone below 15% HP. So that's definitely going to be something you might want to look at in this scenario.
And not to mention, it seems like Syndra has not missed a single Scat of the Week stun.
Yeah.
Every single one seems to have landed so far, and that is so much pressure on Hope. Early game, still 0-3, 160 farm, just trying to find a little bit of ground to stand on, as really the early game was all in favor of that Syndra and Baton.
Yeah, and another thing to note is, as well, Victor building Leandries. That's an interesting pick. I've never played Victor, so I don't know this from experience, but I assume maybe Ludens would have been an option, but again, I've never played the character. We do see Ludens on Syndra, and Syndra looks like is going to complete Radabloon's Death Gap here in a bit. Has the two needlessly large rods, or I believe that's what that is, and
Indeed.
and right now it's even with Baron, George Mason.
Oh my
goodness.
What else do you say about that? The lead easily in favor of Syndra, now 8-0, 1,000 in the bank, an absolute 100-0 deletion. And we were talking about the lead that Syndra had over Hope, and that's exactly what it looks like put into practice.
There's that execute I was talking about. Oh my goodness. What a massive damage output by that Syndra. And I want to see the damage graphs after this, because I guarantee you Syndra's got to be up there, top damage. Yeah, I think Hecarim's a close second.
Well, just did at least 1,500, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, that was absolutely unreal. Red turret will fall there. Inhib exposed on the right side. George Mason will take that. Super minions now in that lane. Going to go in favor. Stun going to come out there. And Sia Creighton, you are now dead. You have just been Syndra'd. And now Shenandoah going to try and get something here, but that's a massive ultimate there by Hecarim. Going to take out most of Shenandoah, and George Mason will steamroll to victory. Aatrox, last one standing, is going to heal up. Jhin ult is going to go out, but that's not going to... Oh, that is going to do enough to kill the Aatrox. Oh
in
my
the fountain.
Goodness.
That just goes to show you the lead that Jhin has as well, 7-1. And that is going to be GMU taking game number 1 in the semifinals here in the MAEC playoffs.
Wow. I mean, what a game. Even at first, and then mid-game hit, and then that went right out the window. George Mason just steamrolled the victory. I mean, what a performance by George Mason in that one. I mean, absolutely fantastic. And I think the difference maker in that one, it seemed like the Hecarim early on, but in the end, it was the Syndra.
I mean, it's Hecarim early on, Syndra later on, and I'll tell you what, boy. But we've got plenty to say, but we may as well let our analysts do a little bit of analyzing. Boys, what do you guys think of that one?
Yeah, thank you guys so much. What a match. Oh my goodness. It was even at first, and it looked like the plan was at least falling sort of in SU's favor at first, right? We talked a lot about how that early game was really where GMU wanted to live, where they wanted to survive and thrive. Yeah. And it seemed like at least at first SU was keeping up with them, but you know, all of a sudden, just things started snowballing out of control. Basically, we did see First Blood go to SU, but then it was directly traded back. Yeah, and then after that kill, everything just started getting out of control. GMU got the first dragon, they got the first herald, and then they just kept getting more and more objectives. They kept taking more and more control of the map. Mid lane in particular seemed like it was really, really struggling. We talked also about how SU wanted to play maybe a little bit in favor of top lane, and it just looked like that Aatrox could not really get the foothold that they were hoping for up in top. Yeah, that it was definitely a tough matchup to watch, sort of on the side of SU. Kind of like what I talked about. The whole point of the GMU top laner they're picking the Jax is he's able to go in really easily. He has basically a single target ability where he says, oh, I'm going to jump, and I'm just going to jump to you right now. And Aatrox has to keep this level of space in between him and his enemy to actually be able to sort of deter that sort of activity, to actually like knock him up, use some sort of crowd control ability. And that just wasn't really able to happen. We also saw, like in the early game, definitely an abnormal start from both sides of the jungle. They both started on the top side, sort of went for that bot gank first.
it ended up working out sort of because they mirrored each other. But it would have been really interesting to see if they had mix matched and sort of ganked the opposite lanes at the same time on opposite sides of the map. But yeah, we saw them both go down to bot lane early, sort of have that early game trade. The Jhin just sort of was not able to be killed as many times as the Senna. That's sort of just how it goes. He has a little bit more mobility than the Senna in that regard, especially with the Karma on the side of GMU with that Hecarim. Yeah, they basically did, I think, what we about expected, which was they kept the tempo up in that early mid-game and really capitalized just off the pure mobility and AoE of their abilities, just the wide range of their damage.
Yeah, I mean, and when we're talking about GMU and their mobility, that Hecarim just played such an important role, was literally all over the map. We saw it even before they had enough speed and mobility and time to, do a little bit of ward faking, like, oh, pass over this ward and then double back, trying to get some ganks when the team wasn't expecting it. It's just all thanks to the speed that Hecarim had.
Exactly.
Was able to just fly around that map and really just kind of, just outspeed the Jarvan, who I would say was having a good game, was doing a great job on the side of SU, just unfortunately not as impactful as the Hecarim, who was just putting in so much work.
Yeah, and we saw a lot that in that early and mid game as well. The Karma was sort of leaving the Jhin alone in that GMU bot lane. The Jhin was sort of just taking cover under the tower, taking the CS where he could get it, and sort of slowly scaling and only really taking the kills that were given to him. And we were able to see the Karma sort of roam around with this Hecarim and sort of give him the speed boost. And the different side lanes that he, the mid lane, the top lane that he was showing up in, really made an impact on some of those fights. Whereas, we have two bot laners in the bot lane versus their one guy, and so we're sort of scaling a little slower. The Seraphine or the Senna can't really roam just because they're both reliant on being around each other. And it was sort of just a 4v3 on the, from the bot side up,
Right.
which definitely gave the GMU early to mid game advantage.
Right, and they did a fantastic job just capitalizing on that over and over again. Even when we look at the mid lane specifically, this Syndra 10-0,
yeah,
insane scoreline. Did not die once. Even on that bot lane, the Jhin 7-1, just a fantastic scoreline. And on the other side, on SU, right, particularly this Victor, Hope, just not really able to find their foothold in this game. I believe they ended 0-4, just not really able to find their place, unfortunately, in the team. Wasn't able to really make as much of an impact in the mid lane. Yes, they were there, but it wasn't enough. Like, it would not stop or deter a lot of these ganks. Or earlier in the game, we saw a fight happening just a little bit above mid in the river.
Yeah.
And it was just Syndra had the ability to rotate over, and Victor just couldn't rotate. And
exactly.
Which just allowed for, I believe, 2 kills going in favor of GMU. And that's kind of all she wrote at that point, right? The mid lane takes advantage and then has that ability to rotate up or down and just take more space and control, just forcing SU back under their tower, forcing them less gold, less objectives, and at the end of the day, GMU just did a great job of capitalizing on all of that.
Yeah, when we look at sort of that mid lane matchup, the Syndra, as she currently stands, she didn't get buffs, I think, at the preseason, but maybe the patch right before it, the last patch of the last season. So she's really in a strong place right now where she's able to both, have a lot of 1v1 like fight winning potential, but also have a lot of wave clear, so that we sort of saw that where she was able to sort of set up for the ganks with constant poke and CC, and then also be able to clear those waves faster than the Victor was. And it not only put a negative impact on the Shenandoah mid lane, but it also put that impact onto the jungler as well, because that Jarvan and Victor are really looking to combo. But if the Jarvan is setting him up and the Victor can't really sort of finish the play because the damage output just isn't enough,
right,
the whole sort of synergy kind of falls through. So, that Syndra, both with the poke, the CC, and the wave clear, was sort of just able to roam around, hover on top of her jungle, sort of help out, whenever needed. We saw in that early game fight, like you mentioned, and it really made the impact between a lot of really important kills in that early mid game.
Yeah, and so overall, as we said before, I think it started out pretty even. Both these teams are kind of going back and forth. GMU just slowly started gaining a lead, and at the point that the game had was nearing its midpoint, they had just started to snowball out of control. And with that, GMU just did a great job of capitalizing on that.
Yep.
Moving into game number 2, this is a best of 3 situation, so we do have at least one more game, but so it's not done by a long shot. We still have game 2 and potentially a game 3 as well to look at. Moving into game 2, if you are on the side of SU, on the side of Shenandoah University, what would you change? What would you fix up in order to kind of make this comeback?
I think that they definitely need to take a closer look at their jungle picks, sort of the jungle mid synergy. If Hope isn't really in a position, like in a player matchup, like standpoint, individual versus individual, where he can really sort of win out that mid lane and really be able to capitalize with his jungler, I feel like the jungler, Etherealist, should really be looking sort of at those side lanes. He was kind of doing that at the early game, but it just reached a point where he was trying to make plays top side of the map or whatever, and it sort of just spiraled out of control. So we're moving into draft here. We actually see that... I believe that is, so the GMU side already banned out the Senna and the Yuumi, both targeted at the support here, and sort of similar bans from the SU side, except they're banning out the Aatrox this game, as well as the Hecarim. We actually see a Wukong blue side pick number 1 from the SU. This is something I actually talked about with some of the players because, and I think the casters talked about this a lot, the item Ravenous Hydra is so strong that, they really want to capitalize and pick some of those champs a bit more that really can utilize that item to the best of, the champion's ability.
And this is what we were talking about during the game as well, where we were looking at, hey, why was Wukong banned first?
Exactly,
why was he banned immediately? When we were like, I think SU can probably play this character. They probably want to play this character, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. They're going to first pick Wukong so that they at least have that character on deck, and they feel comfortable potentially seeing that character in the jungle more top, potentially. Yeah,
it's sort of a flex pick. I think Kevin is able to play it in that top lane, but I know that it's intended initially for jungle. We actually see sort of a similar draft from GMU as the first game, where they're sort of picking the jungle and probably the bot lane, and will be the support in the first 3. And on the SU side, we see what is now determined, or definitely the jungler in that Wukong, and then the top lane Gangplank, which is definitely a pick that we love seeing out of Way Awesome Kevin, the man Whack. Sort of his number 1 pick in that top lane, his one trick, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a go-to, is that Gangplank.
Exactly, yeah. So we're going to be seeing some big barrels out of Kevin in the top lane, and it looks like they're going to pick Riven to counter it, actually, sort of saving that support pick for later down the draft as we move into the second phase of bans. And just based off the first 3 picks, it definitely looks like the SU side might even be up, I dare to say. It really depends on, I guess, what they're going to ban out, probably in support and mid. But it does seem like the draft is a little heavier on our side in these first 3 picks for game number 2.
Yeah, I think there is something to be said about meta and characters that are good, and then there's also something to be said about just comfort picks as well. Yeah. And when we look at a character like Gangplank, definitely has some technical skill associated with the character, but at the end of the day, Way Awesome Kevin just loves this character to death. Loves this character so much. So I am very interested to see how Gangplank does, especially when you have a character that Kevin just absolutely adores. And we are going to see a couple of bans come out. We do see the Caitlyn get banned out as well.
Yeah.
And the Syndra.
GMU actually opting for 5 whole bans specifically targeted at the bot lane. The first 2 being support, and the last 3 being the AD carry. So they're really trying to put the pressure on, I guess, what they consider would be our strongest lane, which has got to be that bot lane. And we'll sort of see what they pick here. Opting for sort of a, with the Leona, the heavy CC support to really, or even Rel, to go in with that, the Tristana. They're definitely looking, or on the GMU side, they're building sort of a hard engage comp with that Rel, with the Riven, with definitely a solid backline behind it to do a lot of burst damage with the Graves, and then the Tristana with her bombs. And it definitely looks like on the SU side, based on the next 2 picks, we'll sort of see how it develops. But, so far we're sort of looking like AoE sort of control, sort of similar to last game, but a little different. And we actually see the Corki pick there for the mid lane, which is something I also talked about with some of the players beforehand. I don't think Hope was completely prepared to play it, but I think that this game, SU is saying, okay, we're going to double down on the Ravenous Hydra strats, and we're just going to, play essentially 3 champions on the top side of the map and mid that basically all utilize this item. And we'll see how that goes. And actually a brand from Sincere Support on the SU side, not something that we typically see in team play really ever, but this actually does seem like a pretty good pick considering that sort of what I said earlier, that, GMU is going for this hard engage comp. The Riven, the Rel are pretty much going to be ending up in the same place. That Tristana usually puts the bomb on the person she wants to actually jump on, so she'll be in close range of the enemies in that situation. And all these champs don't really have much range at all. So the brand might actually be quite the mitigator in terms of keeping them spaced out from each other. As we see the Victor get counterpicked into the Corki mid. I think definitely for this game, it'll be a little harder for that Victor to really impose a lot of priority onto the mid lane into the Corki matchup. Corki's typically known as somebody who's like pretty hard to kill. Just because of a lot of the utility he has. He has a large dash. He has a passive every 10 minutes, I believe it is. That's just a giant like landing strip of fire, I guess you could say, that knocks people back when you actually use it. So draft definitely looking a lot better on the SU side for game number 2, and I'm really excited to see how they utilize some of these champions that, might not be, we have the comfort pick in top, but in terms of the jungle, in terms of the mid lane, maybe not the most comfortable picks, but sort of, I guess, what the meta tells us to play. So we'll see how that really factors in with some of these, updated items in the preseason.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Of course, it really does come down to how well can they play these characters, or how good are these characters, right? Because you said some of the players may be playing characters that they're a little uncomfortable with or unfamiliar with. I think particularly when we're looking at this SU mid lane, I think it is a fair assumption to say that the GMU mid laner is indeed better than Hope when it comes to playing that mid lane. So I think really when it comes to SU's focus on the mid lane, they just need to focus on Hope surviving.
Exactly, yeah.
And not feeding into that other mid lane, especially when you have a character like Victor who can really scale it and get out of control. Maybe not as much as we saw the Syndra go crazy and out of control.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah. But just having Hope focus on surviving and allowing those other lanes to develop and grow, especially when you have your top laner playing a very comfortable character, a character that we've seen go crazy if left alone, left to grow and kind of farm up on their own. And then, of course, on that bot side, of course, allowing those characters to develop. I think just hoping that Hope will stay alive a little bit longer.
Exactly. And the Corki definitely makes it easy for him to do that as well. Like, sort of like I said, Corki in the team play situation is mostly reliant on his ult, or the ult passive. So we'll really see that come out in the team fights and really make the impact.
Yeah, well, I am so excited to see how game number 2 looks up. We're going to send it over to the casters and get their opinion. Take it away, guys.
Thank you so much, Alex. And what an interesting draft we have. I got to say, I love it. A lot of interesting picks going to come out here. We see Corki, we see Brand, we see Rel. I mean, just kind of weird picks all around, and I love it. Shenandoah trying to just kind of throw him off, maybe catch him off guard with some things. But the main thing I want to talk about from that is the gangplank in the hands of Way Awesome Kevin. Last time I saw him use that, I saw him almost one-shot a mid laner. So we'll see what comes out of it today.
If you got the barrels on lock, anything is possible. Yeah. It looked to me like GMU was favoring a comp that was, no surprise, a very dive and engage heavy team, right? I mean, you already played off that Hecarim, and that was one of the first bans that SU did because they knew how much, for good reason, they knew how much pressure was coming out of that early on in game number 1, but here in game number 2, I mean, it still looks like they're favoring that very engagey sort of style of play, especially with Tristana being able to hop around everywhere.
But Tristana Rel is going to be an issue, for sure, especially early on. So I think if bot lane can survive, I think that will help them out a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, and you talking about the gangplank a little bit. Riven has a ton of different CC that can put down onto gangplank, but he's always got his citrus.
Yep.
So if he's able to time that right on Riven's sort of stuns, then it could be continuing to be a pretty fair fight there in the top lane. It will be about, Way Awesome Kevin being able to survive, and not only survive, but thrive and take over that top lane and really put the Riven at a disadvantage. But, I mean, the jungle pressure really tells the tale and dictates whether or not that's going to be possible.
Yeah, and another thing to keep in note about Gangplank is global ultimate. So let's say they dive hard, Tristan and Rel dive hard in the tower. Gangplank can ult on that stretch of area and slow them down, and maybe allow another turret shot or two, which we've seen has been the case for a lot of kills early on. So definitely that's going to be something to keep in mind for sure. And I think, honestly, bot lane is going to decide who wins this one. Because I think Riven and Gangplank are both kind of in the same boat, kind of waiting towards that mid-late game, where Riven has low cooldowns, is able to put out that CC, and Gangplank just does massive amounts of damage. And it looks like... And another thing I also want to note, though, is George Mason wants to try and win early. You have Tristana and Rel, which is insanely dangerous early on. Then you also have Graves. Graves is one of the strongest early game junglers in the game. You have to be so careful about him. He's able to put out so much damage in really a blink of an eye. So that's something you definitely have to keep an eye on. And Wukong, while not the worst early game, not the best though. So maybe as we get things going in this one, we'll see maybe junglers apply pressure maybe after clearing one half of the jungle. Maybe an early gank in this one. And Hope is going to get poked out on this Corki, which I love that pick, honestly. Corki is just such a funny character. And I think Victor will win early on, but here we go. Sincere is going to get dove. Ignite goes out. And Rel and Tristana just do so much damage.
Oh, wow. Sincere barely escaping. Creighton just trying to do whatever damage while they just completely ignore him. And hopefully later on that starts to become an issue. And look at the pressure from every single lane. SU Hope needing to, make sure not to trade out valuable health. Oh boy, Tristana looking to hop right back in. If you're Hope, you gotta try not to trade out valuable health like that. And that's first blood going over to Victor. And I think that all stemmed from a play just a little bit earlier on where there was a shot that he was trying to go for a couple caster minions and lost about 200 health in response. And then you give it a little bit of time, Victor gets the cooldowns back, and it suddenly becomes a kill. And the pressure is back. But Corki, hopefully, well, now with having the teleport, is going to be able to get back to lane super quick, so not losing much for it, besides giving up that 400 gold for first blood over to Victor.
Yeah, and honestly, I think Shenandoah knows that they need to play for the late game. Early on, they're going to start losing, but you need to be careful to not let that snowball. You need to try and play smart and play safe when you can. Don't try and get overly aggressive, because if you try to, George Mason will make you pay. And especially with this comp that they have, we see Way Awesome Kevin pushed up against the back of his turret, and that's just going to happen here early on. You kind of just have to deal with it. Hope gets first blooded, unfortunately, but you also got the flash off of the Victor. Yeah. So you definitely want to try and just, I wouldn't say feed. Well, obviously you don't want to try and feed, but you want to try and mitigate the amount of damage that they'll do early on here.
Yeah, and something to note, and while Graves is now going for the gank here top lane, and it looks like going to be able to walk out is Way Awesome Kevin. But if you take a look at the summoner smells between Gangplank and Riven actually has Ignite. So not looking for the global presence like Gangplank with the teleport and obviously the ultimate, but also really just going for kill pressure here in top lane and get ahead that way.
Yeah, and Way Awesome Kevin loves this Gangplank, and Graves trying to deny him that farm. Way Awesome Kevin is going to have to flash out, and a kill will go to the Riven, who will manage to escape. Hope getting poked out. Shenandoah right now backs against the walls. Massive gold lead early on here. Hope not going to really be able to get any farm here, and looks like bot lane for George Mason is going to
Oh, wow, look at
get that
Baton.
pressure.
Just going to force out all of this farm, dying to the tower, not even going to be able to get any of the EXP for it. And Graves in the far jungle, too. Look out, Hope.
Oh my goodness, barely gets away from that one. He's got it back again. Look at that CS difference in mid lane. Almost double the CS that the Corki has. So just absolutely great job there by the Victor, denying that farm for that Corki. Hope trying to kind of backpedal and figure out something to do.
Oh my gosh, and look at the lead that Victor has. Currently a 700 gold lead just 5 minutes into the game. That is so much extra gold for this state of the game. Unbelievable job so far. I mean, we knew that the jungle was going to be probably a big difference maker in this game, but who would have thought?
Yeah, and right now, it looks like Gangplank's starting to get some pressure onto this Ribbon, and heard some sounds behind me. It sounds like Overwatch action's heating up with Shenandoah versus George Mason. So that's going to be something to maybe keep an eye on for the finals of Overwatch, which is coming up after this game. And honestly, I cannot wait for it. But let's focus on the game at hand. Way Awesome Kevin pushed up against the turret, and I believe he just took a tower shot or two.
Yeah, Way Awesome Kevin definitely on the low side, but using those Qs, able to get plenty of damage down onto Riven. Riven, if timed right, has that ideal shield, able to sustain through big engages. And now we're going to cool off here for a moment. Brand stepping up, though, looking to get a little bit of damage down, but the damage is going right back onto him. And really, I think, once again, GMU going to walk away with the favor of that. A little tickle down from Corki onto Victor there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the message that Shenandoah wants to send with this bot lane is CC. I mean, Nami Bubble and Brand Stun is so strong, and we're going to see Ethereal is try and set up a gank, but I think George Mason either A, saw him, or B, wasn't even going to go in anyways. So he's just going to elect to back and keep on trying to farm to keep up with that Graves. And another thing to note here is Way Awesome Kevin, now that he had that pressure, look at that CS gap starting to close. And another thing to note is the CS gap between Victor and Corki slowly starting to close now that Hope has started to get towards that mid-game area when Corki starts to be viable, and he's got a chance to make use of it. Does have Cole as well on that starter item there, so definitely going to be able to clear lane a lot faster. And Way Awesome Kevin on this Gangplank doesn't find damage at all. That's surprising. I thought for sure he'd find damage there. And it looks like Ultimate's going to come out ripping.
Oh my goodness.
Just so much damage. Mid-air apparently doesn't get affected by that. And it looks like George Mason will find a kill top lane and take out Infernal Dragon for the first Dragon of match number 2 here.
Yeah, and you know what that call speaks to me is that Hope is looking to just farm here and try and get a little bit back, right? Farm up and try and get some money down the road, make up a little bit of that difference despite being so far behind in the CS. So, gonna have to play a safe game because of the damage that Victor does, but gonna start, as he's able to develop that tier, gonna be able to poke down the CS a little bit safer, right?
Yeah.
And a little bit of counter jungling there from Graves, so the global pressure from the jungler once again continuing to be so fierce. Now Graves in the bottom lane, look out, bubble dodge, and this is the entire bot lane pushing in. Creighton under attack, and that is going to be the bomb going off, but a little bit of response from Brand, and that's going to be a nice little 1-for-1 despite the numbers committed over to the bottom lane. Hopefully with the extra time available, something might be able to happen. But with Gangplank up here, it always seems like this lane is pushed in, and then it kind of hurts Kevin in a way because he's a little bit away from his tower, and the kill pressure from that Ignite Riven is so fierce.
Yeah, and that burn from the passive of Brand did end up giving Creighton that kill. So maybe we see him go double burn. He does have Lost Chapter online, so most likely going to be building into Leandry's, maybe even into Demonic Embrace. Double burn early on can do a good amount of damage, especially if you get some kills and shutdowns, which we see Brand with a kill already, so that's definitely not out of the question. Rel looking towards top to see if he can try and assist Ribbon. Nothing going to be able to find out there. And now George Mason going to try and maybe regroup a little bit. Way Awesome Kevin going to farm up with this Gangplank. Riven now kind of extending his CS lead a little bit, but the big difference between the two is, of course, the kill and assist that Riven has.
And obviously, once Brand hits that level 6, then the team fight potential is absolutely there. But, you know, with mana regenerating early items, definitely looking to go for a big poke-heavy early start, especially with Nami by your side. And hopefully, you're able to poke down enough to either deter engages, or once you're ready to engage, bot lane for SU can take command. But once again, the landslide, it's not quite a landslide. There's actually been quite a bit of mitigation as far as stopping the bleeding, putting a tourniquet here on how many kills you're going to give up, and Kevin just has to run, but Kevin has nowhere to run under the tower. No problem. 3 people top, and now going to be able to...
Rel, or not Rel, Riven barely living has to use the shield in her kit to try and get out of that one. That one almost could have been bad. I believe that would have been an execute though, so I don't think would have been too worried about it. And meanwhile, looks like...
Oh no, now the rotation to mid. Look out, Hope, because this is an engage heavy grouping just traveling through your jungle looking for the next victim.
However, support roaming around for George Mason means bot lane pressure for Shenandoah. They successfully get a plate, and they're going to back off in that scenario. Hope is going to manage to get out of that. What a great job. And look how much damage that turret just did to Rel. I mean, that was so much. The dismount from Rel doesn't really matter, and it looks like they'll drop Rift on that mid lane turret. And Hope is going to barely have his tower survive. That's a lot of plates. He's got to be able to auto the back.
He's got to get to the back of Shelly, but Shelly keeps turning.
They always turn when you don't want them to. I swear. That's how that works. Creighton will take a few shots there. Joni is going to avoid the barrel and ignite. Way Awesome Kevin, and he's just going to be able to walk underneath his turret. And now you got to be careful if you are Joni. Way Awesome Kevin wants to go in, but he doesn't know the Grace is there. Riven engages onto him. He's trying to just walk around and kite, but it's not to be able to do anything against 2 people. Graves and Riven proved too much there for Way Awesome Kevin. And now this Rel is just roaming everywhere right now.
And I think what Kevin needs to do right now is recognize that, one, he's 0-4 with a 1,300 gold deficit to the Riven. And not only that, but he has to assume that his turret is the only place that he needs to basically be. And of course, he's died a couple times underneath it, but maybe barrel up, don't start any engages, and then go half health under the turret. Because I was saying there was a tourniquet on, you know, the amount of dying that a lot of the lanes were doing while the bottom lane was starting to pick up a little bit of pace. And all of a sudden, that was when Gangplank was 0-2. Now he's 0-4. It's 2-0-2 on Riven, 2-0-2 on Graves, and they're just having a field day.
Yeah, and maybe Triforce coming out here from Gangplank. That's looking like the build path for right now. Just needs that last little bit of gold. But another thing I want to kind of keep an eye on is the gold difference. Despite Shenandoah losing pretty much every lane right now, gold isn't too far gone. I mean, granted, 4,000 is close to 4,000 is a decent amount as well, with this dragon going to go into favor of George Mason. And now they have 2. However, look at that grand damage right there. Creighton also, though, getting low, and now Rel trying to run around, and there's Graves to try and help clean up this kill. Nami healing is going to be enough, and that's going to be 2 falling, and now you have to be careful. This is going to start snowballing for your team. Wukong ultimate is going to come out. However, Riven's just not going to care about it. Going to stand in the Gangplank ult, and he will actually find that kill on the Riven. Big shutdown right there by the Gangplank, and we see Riven with that Ravenous Hydra that I was mentioning earlier. That's going to proc on every single one of Riven's abilities. So all 3 stages of Q will have that AoE effect, and now SU Hope is in that poke potential area and is doing so well with that ultimate. And now I think they realize Graves is in the jungle. Near sight is going to come out, but not going to be able to do much. And Rel is going to be there to save it. And Ethereal is to will smite that, I believe, unless Graves did that to steal that away.
And once again, GMU, like I was saying in game number 1, controlling the tempo of the game. And it's not even necessarily needing to be any sort of tempo thing at this stage. It is the pressure on every single one of the lanes. Not only are all of the lanes winning themselves, just because of the oppressive damage that's being put down from the laners, but then you also have the jungler in Optimistic Ego, who seems to be everywhere, despite being on Graves instead of Hecarim, always being in the right spot at the right time with very, very impressive.
Meanwhile, Nami, big bubble there. Way awesome. Kevin gets another kill onto Riven. If you're Riven, do you start sweating a little bit now that Way Awesome Kevin's been able to get 2 on you?
I don't know, because it's going to get traded back right here, 1v1. Hope was a little bit too far up, and Victor said, well, you know what mistake you just made? You crossed the river, and this is my side.
And another thing to note is when George Mason is playing Victor, they have Ludens online rather than Leandries, which I think is interesting because we saw Hope play Victor in the last one and was able to do stuff with Leandry, or
well, tried
to do stuff with Leandry.
I definitely see the idea that he had there trying to build Leandry's early on. If it ever came online and Jax got to a point where he was so beefy, such a big, scary person late game, then Leandry's was going to help out with that pressure a little bit and the health bars. But I think early game Ludens always feels like a better bet because of the burst damage.
Yeah, it just does so much extra damage that you really got to keep an eye on. Plus the armor pen as well, because if you have someone build armor resist early on, or not armor resist, magic resist early on, that's something you got to try and keep an eye on for sure. And we're gonna see Way Awesome Kevin just try and farm up in his lane. Ribbon pushed up yet again. But really no surprise there. Another thing to note is Graves as well has that Ravenous Hydra. It just goes to show how strong of an item it is. And it is getting changed, but
for now,
probably for now it's an issue, but in the future, most likely will not be. Also, Etherealist died right there. And Sincere, double flashes coming out there. Rel gonna just keep his teammate alive, and right now they are just wiping the board of Shenandoah. 3 dead for SU. Creighton gonna try and do something big. Flash in there from the Riven. Not gonna be able to find anything though. Rel linked to that Riven. That's gonna be something to keep an eye on. Damage is gonna come out right there between Creighton and Gangplank, and Creighton with a lot of damage. So is the Gangplank. And do you start sweating a little bit if you're George Mason about maybe potential big damage coming out here from late game team?
It's interesting because all of a sudden Gangplank is basically even in gold with that Riven.
Yeah.
And you start to think, okay, well, if Gangplank has just as much gold as Riven, then probably in a good spot there. But the problem right now, is, yes, Riven can give up a couple kills, but you've got a 4-0 Graves, a 4-0 Victor, a 1-0 Tristana. It is just every single person on GMU has some sort of lead at this moment, and not even a small lead. There's a 5,000 gold difference between mid lane. Victor is huge.
Yeah, and it's at this moment, maybe if you're Shenandoah, you're looking back in the draft and be like, you know, maybe we should have picked Corky. But again, all in hindsight, and right now, I think it's the same story as last game. We saw Shenandoah just get absolutely destroyed by just the dominance of mid lane and jungle. And if you're SU, I know you have a late game team, but this might be too far gone to even close that gap. So I think you have to kind of rely on individual performances like the Gangplank or the Brand.
Yeah, it's crazy that Victor is almost single-handedly responsible for the goal difference of both the teams.
Yeah.
That just blows my mind. They've got 3 dragons to their name as well. They've got map control through and through. This will take a series of miracle plays, but it doesn't really matter when your entire health bar goes down to one little combo from Victor because of that 5-0, because of the nearly 200 CS. It is just so much damage. You take out one player and all of a sudden you've got so much of an advantage already. And now, look at this. They're just not even respecting the walls of the SU base. That's going to be another one. Tristana diving in, and the rest of GMU going to continue to take down this inhibitor with the help of Shelly. And do they continue? They're definitely going to take out Corky. Thank you for that free kill. And they're going to get the charge off on the Nexus turret.
Wait, are they going to get the second one off?
Oh my
They're
goodness.
going for the end.
They're going for the finish. Is SU going to be able to withstand the onslaught?
We'll see right here. Etherealist with one. Doesn't quite find the second. Optimistic Ego is linked up on that Graves.
He wants
the
it.
damage coming out onto Sincere. Can he grab it? Has no mana. Nami Bubble does end up missing. And now you have to be so careful if you are that brand. But now you have to be careful if you're Optimistic Ego. You are linked up, but can't take the Hex Tech and the shutdown from the Gangplank of all people. And now Shenandoah trying to survive the siege. They have to deal with the super minions in mid, but you just gave 1,000 gold to probably the last person you want to give 1,000 gold to, the Gangplank.
It is such a. I want to, believe, right, in this moment. Give it just being a little bit.
Of course we do.
Being a little bit too aggressive in that Graves cost them giving back 1,000 gold in differential here. But SU just had their entire Nexus cracked open, and it is just sitting there for any sort of backdoor if it happens, right? Only one person has the teleport on their base, so if they left any wards down there, then that is a possibility. But Nami now, look, they're just going to go back, heal up, and march right back down. All they have to do at this point is ARAM, and they actually kind of caught SU by surprise.
They did.
And they're just going to go right for the Nexus. Well, maybe get a couple more kills along the way, but there you go. Tristana going to deal the damage. And
Victor's
ladies and gentlemen,
stunned. Oh my goodness.
GMU is going to take the game and the series against Shenandoah 2-0, and they will advance to the grand finals of the MAEC playoffs.
I mean, that was absolutely unreal. What a performance from both these teams. It's just George Mason, early game comp, was able to steamroll the victory. That on the back of that victor, I don't think that person has died the entire set. I don't think the Syndra ever died. I don't think the Victor. Oh no, Victor died at the end when he was in the base.
Real good player.
Very close, but yeah, I mean, absolutely unreal.
Baton is just insane.
Yeah. I mean, hats off to you. What a performance there. I believe that's going to be it though for me and Xander. Right now, we're going to send it right back to the analyst desk, guys. Have fun with this one.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. What a fantastic cast you had, but. Wow, what a game, what a series. GMU, of course, holding strong on their first seed position. I think SU had some moments where they were really giving them a run for their money. But at the end of the day, looking at both of those games in the series, GMU looked dominant the entire time. I mean, especially looking into this draft, you and I both kind of thought maybe SU had a little bit of an advantage coming into that draft, but maybe that was just an advantage on paper. We talked about it before. Where does the comfort picks lie and where does the meta picks lie? And again, I think we have to just bring attention to this mid lane again, where Corky, I think, would and is a good pick, but it just looked like Hope was unprepared for it. It did not look like a very comfortable pick for them. Unfortunately gave up first blood to that Victor, really allowed more pressure, more CS to go in favor of Victor, and really the mid laner on the side of GMU doing a fantastic job of just denying that mid pressure from Corky at all for the entirety of the time. Even when we look up at top lane, right? Gangplank, we see Way Awesome Kevin. We were talking about this. This is a super, very, very fun character, very character that Way Awesome Kevin loves to play.
Absolutely.
But the Riven and then even the ganks from Graves just made it so difficult for Gangplank to find a foothold into this game. We saw a couple of kills later on, especially in the later part of that game, but really for that early and mid kind of section of the game, Gangplank wasn't really able to do much except get out of tower a little bit and then run back under when a gank happened or when Riven just kind of pushed forward.
Yeah, we sort of saw a repeat with some of the conceptual stuff from last game, like you said, in the mid lane. You know, that Victor on the side of GMU just sort of able to get that lead, sort of built up on the Corki. You know, while Corki is a good pick typically, especially in team play, and he did do his job. He might have gave up first blood, but, you know, it wasn't really the determining factor in giving up a lot of gold. Most of those deaths are in, like, the late game. I think he only had one death through maybe the first 10 or so minutes, but he just really, you know, Hope on that Corki just really wasn't able to sort of catch up on that lead. We talked about before the game too, like the item that they're really trying to capitalize on, right? They wanted to build a Hydra, the Ravenous Hydra item on Gangplank, on Wukong, and on Corki, sort of have that strong three character combo with this really strong item, but they just weren't even really able to even reach that point in the game where they're able to build those items just based off of a early game lead that got built up by that GMU squad. Sort of the repeated ganks on Kevin or on Way Awesome Kevin on that Gangplank. They might have left the pick open of his one trick, but they knew to respect it because they showed up in his lane quite a lot. So they really made a point out of shutting that down. Sort of did the same thing in bot lane too. That Rel on the GMU side sort of roamed around, left the Tristana to herself, and she was basically just able to live, sort of give up her priority in exchange for the priority of the jungle and the mid lane. Pretty similar to what we saw in game one.
Yeah, and it really did come down to that roam that GMU had. It was so strong that we were looking at it, we were watching it, we were like, SU just needs to do something, right? They need to match it, or they need to change up something that they're doing.
Yeah.
And they just weren't able to adapt fast enough. They weren't able to adapt effectively enough in order to stop this really, really strong roam that is just going around taking out SU's lane one by one as GMU is just roaming this map. And I mean, I think it just speaks to the strength of GMU and the strength of the strategy that they built, that no matter what composition they're running, they can still kind of find a way to fill in this roam and kind of play the playstyle that they want to, regardless of the characters that they've been, you know, forced to play based on how the draft goes. Even if the draft isn't necessarily as super favorable into them, they still find a way to play their game and to do it effectively as well. In this game, I think GMU had a fantastic start. They started out guns blazing. They did a great job. We saw in that early mid game, we saw SU starting to come back a little bit. They were getting their CS back. We saw WAC starting to make a little bit of a comeback in that top lane. But as soon as there's hope, as soon as there's a little bit of a spark, GMU snuffs it out, and they just immediately take the game back into their favor again. And I think with that, GMU just did a fantastic job both in game one and game number two, really showing why they are the #1 seed and why they deserve a chance in the finals here as they move on.
Chance to compete in those finals again for the top 32 placing or spot in that top 32 bracket for CLOL. Yeah, sort of going back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier with sort of the collegiate landscape, especially for League of Legends, GMU really showing, you know, that individual skill is not, you know, necessarily the most important factor, especially when it comes to collegiate. You know, they might not have been playing in a necessarily traditional way or playing, you know, necessarily the meta. Riven is definitely an off-meta pick. Tristana, Rel, some of those picks in the bot lane. Definitely not things you would see in maybe pro play, but, you know, the way that these GMU players play, this sort of play style with the roaming support, linking up with the jungle, both of them going for dives on top lane, you know, it shows that it's their play style. They've made it their own, and they've really perfected it. And, you know, as we clearly saw in both of those games, or game one and game two, it gives them success. They find success with it. So, you know, they sort of perfected it, worked on it, and we really see the final product here where they're going to bring out everything they can to get into that CLOL top 32.
Yeah, and I am so excited. We will have the league finals a little bit later in the day. So GMU has guaranteed their spot in the finals. We'll have to see how the other side of the bracket has played out. Again, that was ODU versus GWU. And that game probably is finishing up around this point in time. We also heard the arena going crazy as the Overwatch matches were coming to a conclusion. Last time we checked, they were in game number 5, SU versus GMU, but we'll have more